everyone uses money. And if you use money, then finance is for you. I really wanted to write something that kind of broke this myth that finance is complicated or finance is not for me.
There's a lot written about finance on the internet, but why did you choose to write?
I always felt like the books that were out there were very academic. So I wanted to write something friendly. I wanted to write something that would be between step 0 to step 1.
What is the difference that you have noticed between our parents, our fathers versus our children today who are spending money?
For young people, they look at spending itself as a way of life.
Right.
As opposed to our parents who are much happy with less, who are much happy saving.
How does one look at compounding when you are initially starting to invest?
You just need to be really patient with compounding. Like, put your head down, keep investing. At the end of the day, the markets will reward you in the long term.
Hello and welcome to the SapnaRise podcast, where we celebrate stories, ideas, and people who are shaping the way we think, grow, and live one book at a time. Today's guest is someone who's changing the way young India talks and thinks about money. We are joined by Lavanya Mohan, a CA by profession, a financial educator, and now the author of the widely appreciated book, Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. A personal finance guide that's relatable, real, and refreshingly jargon-free. At a time when most people either shy away from talking about money or feel overwhelmed by it, Lavanya brings a voice of clarity and compassion. Her book breaks down everything about budgeting, investing, to credit cards, insurance, and even financial guilt, all through the lens of everyday life in India. What makes this book stand out is that it doesn't just tell you what to do with your money, but also asks you to examine why you should think about money the way you do, shaped by your upbringing, your relationship with work, your gender, and your goals. It's especially powerful for women, young professionals, and first-generation wealth builders, anyone looking to build a better, healthier relationship with their finances. We are so excited to have Lavanya with us today to dive deeper into the themes of her book and understand how we can all move from financial confusion to financial confidence. Lavanya, welcome to the SapnaRise podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start off, Lavanya, I've read this book. It's a wonderful book to personal finance. But why did you start thinking about writing the book? I'm sure there are some books in the market already. There's a lot written about finance on the internet, but why did you choose to write?
So you're right in saying that finance is a fairly saturated topic on the internet as well as in bookstores. But I think where I wanted to really come in was to create that first step, because most of the voices and the books that are out there are catered for the slightly advanced reader. Someone who knows about finance and wants to know a bit more. I always felt like the books that were out there were very academic and not very friendly. And given that young professionals and women today who have access to these books, they aren't reading them because it's so intimidating, right? Because the language is a bit more advanced. So I wanted to write something friendly. I wanted to write something that would be between step 0 to step 1, so that they have the foundation and the confidence to go and approach more advanced topics. Like, in no way is this book like the ultimate guide. It's simply your first step into finance, which I thought was missing. And that was honestly why I also started writing about money, I want to say way back in 2016, because there was no one who was really being friendly in the way that they were explaining money. I think there are a lot of very intelligent personal finance experts who are out there, but it's still a bit intimidating. So I wanted to kind of like calm people down before they try to explore more. So that was really like the journey.
So let's dive right into the book. You start off talking about loud differences between the way the middle-aged group spends money versus the younger millennials, as we speak of, So, what is the difference that you have noticed between our parents, our fathers, versus our children today who are spending money?
So I think one of the biggest differences in the way that the older generation and the current generation approach money is that the older generation was a lot more focused on savings. And we also have to remember that our parents' generation had very limited resources in terms of investing. Like I think back in the 90s, if you wanted to invest in the stock market, for
It
example,
was not an option.
it wasn't really an option unless maybe you were in Bombay, you knew how to open a demat account, which was all
Everything
manual.
physical and all of.
Everything was physical, like share certificates involved, post. So it was a very cumbersome process, which was why the way our parents saved was also a product of its times. Like everybody put money in LIC because that was the only investment option that would come home. Like the agent would come and be like, LIC le lo, and like you will get money and all of that. So today we say LIC is a terrible investment, and it's true, but this was what our parents had access to, right? And they had a far more savings oriented mindset, also because they could be focused on their goals. And today's millennials and young people, they are also living in very difficult times. I was telling someone that it's very difficult for me to think of being a young person right now, and I'm so glad that I'm in my 30s and like much wiser, because you're constantly surrounded by temptation. Our parents did not have the internet. They did not know all the things that were out there that one could buy. Or for them, going abroad 3 times in a year was not normal. If you went abroad once in 3 years, that in itself was a big deal. Today, like you see people constantly going on vacations, constantly spending, constantly doing hauls, and overconsumption is so normalized thanks to social media that for young people, they look at spending itself as a way of life.
Right.
As opposed to our parents who are much happy with less, who are much happy saving. And, they were actually able to save for a house because you didn't have all these distractions. So I just think both generations are products of their times. Like the current internet generation has so many distractions, whereas our parents could be a lot more focused, but they did not have the kind of investing options or avenues that this present generation does.
But you've mentioned about the urban poor that you haven't noticed. It's one of the topics that you've discussed.
Yeah.
So the urban millennials right now, right, because of the advent of social media, everybody's selling on your face. Right?
Yeah.
So is that something which actually helps you build a better lifestyle? Is it helping you have a better standard of living? Or is it something which is, wasting money in terms of, not really utilizing money in terms of investment, but just splurging it in the way things are being shown on social media and the likes?
I definitely think it's very complicated because it's all about appearances today. I feel like you look at people on social, you think they're living an amazing life when there might not actually be any money, real money sitting in the bank account, right? Because you're so obsessed with showing off and like showing yourself to be living in a certain way on social, and people look at social media as if it's real, right? Like it's not like some once in a while thing. People are very serious about social media, right?
They made it their lifestyle also.
You made it their lifestyle. So in no way is it really helping you that you get to post this or you go on holidays. Like I know now people who are taking personal loans to go on European holidays.
Okay.
Which is completely bizarre to me, because if you saved up enough, you can go on that holiday without having to borrow. And
maybe it would take some time, but it's not needed for them to take.
You shouldn't have to get into debt to spend on a holiday. But that is normal now. People take holiday loans. People take wedding loans. So because of social, the idea of this is enough doesn't exist. So everybody wants like Sabyasachi for their weddings, because Sabyasachi is, like the lehengas are constantly in your face and you see the celebrities wearing it. Everything is accessible. So, and the moment you see more of it being pumped into your face, the more you're convinced that it's normal. So it's bizarre to me the way that young people are spending now purely for appearances instead of figuring out the basics. Now, it does run in the back of their heads. I know a lot of young people who actually come to me saying, okay, I don't know where to start. I'm very overwhelmed and all of that. And people do realize at one point in time when things go wrong, like this is a fairly popular statistic, that most Indians are one hospitalization away from bankruptcy.
Wow.
One hospitalization can set you back, right? So people are slowly waking up to it. I think COVID was like a big reminder of how fragile, your finances can get. But it's kind of gone back to, spending again. So I just want young people to get the basics right. Like just get savings in place, have an emergency fund in place, get your health insurance, start your investing journey, and then go on your holiday. Europe isn't going anywhere. Like it doesn't matter if you go in 2025 or 2027.
Right.
But if you can sort your finances out, that holiday will be so much more peaceful.
So we get to different avenues where the younger generation can invest in or look at how they can handle their finances. But a little bit before they get to that stage, do you think the education system overall has it failed us in terms of the way India is progressing? Because you look at schools and curriculum in the West, in Europe, they speak a lot about finance. But why isn't India as a nation, not able to bring about such important topics right in the middle school or the higher school?
So I genuinely think that personal finance should be a part of the curriculum from age 15th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Is a very good time for young people, like students especially, to pick up on personal finance before, they get out into
Right.
the big bad world.
Right.
But it's never taught to us. I remember learning about how to calculate tax in a very vague way, and it was taught to us as like some formula.
Right.
And what's surprising is that people are still doing the same thing. It hasn't improved at all. I think a large part of it is because culturally there is some taboo around discussing money. Like in India, especially, there is a lot of like cultural taboo around discussing money. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to discuss it. If you talk about money or having trouble with money, that means, you failed in life. So there's a lot of like perception problems and culture problems that we have as a people, which I think stops us from talking about money openly. Nobody discusses salaries, for example. People in corporate jobs, even today, will discuss everything except salaries or how much they're actually earning. Nobody wants to talk about it because sometimes if they're doing well, they'll say nazar will come, and like you lose whatever you have. Or like if you aren't doing well, then people will think that you're useless, etc. So there is no open conversation about money even within families. So there's a larger
Something like a pandemic has changed this way of thinking in between friends and families or at workplace. People are more open towards understanding your finances because pandemic was a very big shift in the way people started to look at life, and money did play a very important role. And like you mentioned that one hospitalization really would be a big burden on your finances. So do you think COVID really helped improve this entire conversation?
COVID was definitely an eye opener. I think it definitely opened people's eyes into what needs to be done, in the sense that a lot of families that went through COVID, right, and had the heads of the family kind of pass. So what would have happened, I'll give you a few examples, were the head of the family, usually the male, would have gotten term insurance or
Right.
some life insurance. He'd have done the right thing, he'd have gotten the insurance, but he won't have communicated it,
Communicate.
right? So then the CA, who's also likely in the hospital, has to tell them, listen, this person has insurance, you have to go and claim it. So the widow or the rest of the family is clueless, and they're going through all of this paperwork at a time when they should be grieving. Another example is also the number of people who passed away without thinking about wills, right? So now 70% of the cases in India, like the property disputes in India, are between families. This is a loose statistic. I think it's between 70 to 75% of property disputes in India are between families. So you can imagine the number of disputes that were added to all of this, and the number of people who bought term insurance but didn't, bother to tell their families. So I'll give you another statistic. There's 21,000 crores of unclaimed life insurance in India.
21,000 crores
Crores
of
of
unclaimed.
unclaimed. It's basically people who bought policies, but the family had no idea, so they didn't claim it.
Wow.
So that conversation still needs to become more robust. I think people have now woken up to this, but cultural shifts, take time. I feel like now the younger generation is a bit better. They're not as closed as they were. Now they're opening up a bit.
Right.
They're asking their parents all the right questions. And they're figuring this out for themselves and their families as well. So it is improving. But you're right, COVID was a turning point in terms of getting people to like wake up to the realities of what happens when you don't communicate.
So something more technical, like you mentioned about term insurance, you mentioned about other forms of insurance. So from a basic young person living in India, somewhere close to about say 20 plus or 25 plus, what type of insurance he or she should really look into when it comes to either term or it comes to health or any other insurance?
So I actually work in insurance. So there was a lot of new things that I learned once I joined my workplace. The first is that when you're young, that's the best time to buy insurance. That's usually the last time when people are thinking about insurance,
Right.
but it's the best time to buy when you're
So
young.
planning young is always
Planning young is amazing because you get superb coverage at very low
Less-
prices.
Yeah.
So you can get a 1 crore health policy at like 40-50% of what it'll cost you when you're in your 30s. So we always say get insurance when you're healthy,
Right.
so that when you actually need it, you've not spent too much money on it. So definitely get health insurance. A lot of people with corporate jobs believe that their corporate insurance, which is usually about 5 lakhs, max, is enough. It's never enough. I think you really need to get admitted once to know how expensive hospitalization can get. 5 lakhs is not enough. Definitely get a top up or an additional kind of health insurance policy, because that will come in handy as you get older. So one is health insurance. Term insurance is also something that will give you peace of mind, in that, especially if you're newly married, right? And that's when you'd recommend term insurance. When you're newly married, have dependents, like maybe you're working now, you've become the breadwinner,
Right.
you have parents depending on you. That's also
Securing your generation or securing your parents or your children.
your parents, especially when you have a home loan, especially when you have like an education loan, maybe that you're paying off. This ensures that this financial burden
Right.
does not, pass on to your family. So I would also recommend getting a term insurance if you have dependents and if you have like a big loan. So the truth is that term insurance is not something you need after the age of like 50 or 60, because by that time you've earned, you have your savings, you probably don't have
I
loans.
think that's the most easiest thing to do, right? Put your money in your FD, but not really think about equity or not really think about newer ways of investing. We'll get to that, but like you said, maybe once you're 50 and above, you have something that
you have
saved.
savings in place. Maybe you have a provident fund.
Right.
Maybe you put money in NPS, whatever. You have things in place. So you don't need the backing of a term insurance, but it's very useful for people between the ages of, I want to say, 28 to about 50, which is usually when these home loans are running.
Right.
You have family. You become the sandwich generation where you're taking care of parents and you have young children, right? So you're in the middle. That's when term insurance is really useful.
So all of these, the book also talks about not using certain jargons. So the book also talks about money as a form of language. So can you throw some more light as to why did you think about this, and how will this book really ease the way in which the newer generation or the generation which is sandwiched, like you said, go about understanding their finance for their parents or for their children?
Yeah, so I think it came from speaking to a lot of women and young people who are like, I just won't get money. They won't have even tried understanding it, but they'll throw in the towel and be like, this is just not for me. I think we've all seen people in our own families where, they just like, you take care of it, no? Like they pass it on to like the brothers.
Especially the
fathers.
men of the house.
Yeah. If they say you take care of it, here, like earning women also will just give their
To their husband.
salaries to their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, and be like, you take care of it. I won't understand it without even attempting to understand it. Then the more I spoke to people, I realized they're looking at it like it was some calculus or like some statistics, some formula. Because I think business news also is just like numbers running everywhere. So immediately people think it's maths. And I think all of us have like some trauma of learning maths where we're just like, no, I can't do this anymore. Which is why I was like, if you think about it like formulae, if you think about it like maths, then it's going to be maths, right? But if you instead look at it as language, which is easier to pick up, then it becomes simpler.
Which is actually the case. You feel so that finance is not a lot of economics or not a lot of maths. It's much more easier when you start getting your hands dirty in it.
Yeah, I think finance is not personal finance at least is not a difficult subject. It's really not as technical as some people might think. It just requires you to sit down and like understand it. I would say even cooking and baking is not simple.
Right.
You have to like sit down, you have to get your hands dirty, you have to make a couple of mistakes. And the more time you spend in the kitchen,
Right.
the better you get. So this is just the same. The more time you spend with it, the easier the concepts become. You have to pick up a few fundamentals, that's all. Which is why I really wanted to write something that kind of broke this myth that finance is complicated or finance is not for me. Everyone uses money. And if you use money, then finance is for you. So that's how the book was written. And that's why I say, let's approach it like we'd learn a language. Let's approach it like, you'd watch a TV show. Today, people are watching Korean TV shows. Like, if you can understand Korean television, then this isn't
It's
too
not
different or
different.
too hard.
Yeah.
It's just the whole mindset around personal finance, which I found frustrating. That people are like, no, I won't understand it.
Was it because you were a CA, a practicing CA, you studied finance, it made it a little easier for you? For those who don't come from the finance background, you think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them, especially I'm talking about women inclusion, it's going to get a little bit more difficult, or you feel that it's again just a myth?
I will say that it's a myth, but obviously I have the advantage of not only studying chartered accountancy, which by the way does not teach you anything about managing
Which
your
you
own
mentioned,
money.
yeah.
It does not teach you anything.
It teaches you about managing
Other people's money, or it teaches you how to look at other people's money and financials, but nothing about managing your own money.
personal finance.
So obviously I'm a lot more comfortable with these terms because I've had the opportunity to sit with it for much longer. I studied commerce in my 11th and 12th. So I was always very familiar. And my father's a chartered accountant. We talked a lot about money at home. So I was obviously much more comfortable. But I do agree that I am sitting from a place of advantage. But I definitely think that once anyone, women, younger folks, or even older folks who want to kind of understand money, once they decide that they want to learn, they can and they will pick it up. There's so many resources today.
We've got one resource.
Yeah, including this book. So it's it'll take a bit of time. I'm not saying immediately you will become like an expert and you immediately will understand everything, but it just requires you to kind of commit to reading every day, little bit, just keeping your eye on the news.
Right.
Just reading like that business side of the newspaper. So the more you expose yourself to it, the easier the language of finance becomes. It's like watching, like TV in a certain language every day. People improve their English by watching English news, right? So similarly, if you just like keep reading, it'll come to you.
Fantastic. And I also want to touch upon certain topics that I felt very valuable for our readers, for our listeners. You spoke about the time value of money. How it needs to be looked at, right? What money today is not going to be the same money tomorrow. So a bit about that and how one should be looking about the time value of money.
Yeah, so I think all of us have grown up listening to stories of our grandparents say stuff like, I bought 3 acres with 10 rupees and all. And today you think about what you get with 10 rupees, right? So that is essentially the time value of money. The fact that money today will always be worth more than money tomorrow. So I think it's very important because when you start saving for a particular goal, right? For example, we both have children and we both have to think about their higher education, right? And today, a degree abroad, for example, if you want them to study abroad, today a degree abroad costs a certain amount of money.
Right. It's pretty expensive.
It's pretty expensive as is, but it's going to be so much more expensive in the
After 15
future.
years, yeah.
So, what time value of money teaches you is that this is not the number that you need to save for, you need to save for more.
Right.
Because when that time comes, you're going to be hit with a much bigger cost. Like, I'll give you another example that I think more Indians can relate to. I got married in 2013.
Okay.
My sister got married this year, February of 2025. Between the 12 years, my sister had a more intimate wedding. I had a slightly larger wedding. But in money terms, we have spent more on the recent wedding,
Which was much more intimate.
which was much more intimate and smaller.
Right.
Like, no compromises made with respect to what she wanted or with what I wanted. But if you compare the guest list, they're vastly different. But in rupee terms, we ended up spending more in the newer wedding.
Right.
Simply because the costs are so much more expensive now. And had we budgeted thinking, okay, if this was the cost in 2013 and this is how much we're going to spend now, we wouldn't have gotten anything done. And there was this recent statistic also that I was reading saying the average Indian spends about 32 to 35 lakhs on a wedding now. So
I think that still would be on a lower average.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and in India, that's like a massive amount, right? Like, to say that the average Indian spends 30 lakhs or like 8 years of their income on a wedding is like wild. But that's how expensive it's gotten. And what time value of money teaches you is that if you're thinking about something for the long term, you want to be able to budget for about 30 to 40% more. So you're not caught unawares. The worst thing that will happen is that you'll have more money. You would have saved a bit more than you would have had to, but that's never a bad thing. So
The time value of money and inflation, is it the same thing or does one affect the other? Can you throw a bit more understanding on how inflation really, is the differentiator between the time value of money? Or is it the same?
So they're like two sides of the same coin. So inflation is the reason why, the value of money like depreciates over time. So because of inflation, which is like price rise year on year on year on year, the value of the 10 rupees, which bought 3 acres of land in 1930.
1 gram of gold.
Yeah. People have bought like entire trousseaux for 10 rupees. So that the price rise over time depreciates the value of money, right? Price rise or inflation happens because of different reasons that are out of our control. But at the end of it, the value of your money has depreciated over time. You're not getting the same value for the 100 rupees that you're holding. So what time value of money is that it's not going to be the same. So watch out for it. Why is it not going to be the same? Because of inflation.
Right.
So both are like two sides of the same coin. One causes the other. So they're both concepts you need to be aware of. Inflation also affects you on a daily
Price of tomatoes.
Yeah, onions, tomatoes. So all of a sudden you're on Blinkit and then it's like 200 rupees. So that happens from time to time because of sometimes because of natural disasters, etc. We have different types of inflation that happen, demand pull, and then because of low supplies. Those are technical terms, but inflation happens because of different reasons. Inflation over time is the reason why we talk about time value of money, because it builds, and then...
Very interesting. And also your book talks about the eighth wonder of the world, which is a compounding effect, the magic of compounding. How do you look at it, and how does one look at compounding when you are initially starting to invest?
I think it's one of the things that you have to keep reminding yourself, especially as you start out, because the temptation to just break it and be like, I'm going to Bali is very real, especially today. To be like, okay, I've saved up so much, let me just break it and then move. So compounding really takes time to kick in. Like one of the statistics that I keep telling is that Warren Buffett's wealth happened after he hit 60, age 60, right? And he's been investing from when he was 20 years old. So it took him 40 years to suddenly hit that milestone, right? So similarly, you just need to be really patient with compounding. Like put your head down, keep investing, you know. At the end of the day, the markets will reward you in the long term. So there are a couple of graphs in the book
Right.
where it shows you daily movement versus like the movement over time. And daily will look like some landslide only. It's going up, down, even monthly goes up, down. There are always like things that happen which causes crashes in the short term. But if you look at it from the long term, despite all the crashes, it's always going up. So you want to have that long-term view for yourself also, and just put your head down, keep saving, because it does actually build up to a larger amount, over time. You want to give yourself at least a
Saving-
decade
Saving or investing with saving?
investing.
Investing, right?
So when I talk about investing, I'm saying things like putting money into an SIP,
Right.
right? Over time, you will feel like, okay, what is this 5,000 bucks that I'm putting, every month? But when you start getting into the habit of putting money away in your 20s, especially, by the time you're 35, you would have started earning more. You would have started putting more money into this. It really goes up. Like you do end up.
Some examples for our listeners in terms of how easy it is to start an SIP, and what is the compounding effect of the result of maybe a 15 years or a 20 years of SIP, or if not that long, probably even 10 years of SIP investing.
So I'll give you an example. There's this rule of 72.
Roll of
72.
Okay.
Where it says 72 divided by your return percentage will give you the number of years that will take you to double your money.
Okay.
So let's say you've put in 1 lakh and it's giving you 10% interest. One-time payment of 1 lakh at 10%. Sensex has been giving about 11 to 12%
12%, yeah.
on average. Means in 7.2 years, your 1 lakh would have become 2 lakhs.
Right.
Because
At
the
10%,
interest
yeah.
keeps doubling and interest keeps earning, interest keeps earning. And this is a one-time thing. So you can imagine like every month you keep putting in money, right? And you're able to put in like 1,20,000 every year. 10,000 bucks a month, right? That 1,20,000 alone would have doubled in 7.2 years. But you're doing this year on year on year on year. So it just goes into like a much larger amount because you're constantly adding. I think the SIP plus compounding effect is very powerful because
There's consistency.
there's consistency, which is very important.
Right.
And it's a much larger amount. So 1 lakh and then 1 more lakh and then 1 more lakh. So if you've been investing for 7 years, that's around 8.4 lakhs in just principal.
Principal amount, yeah.
And each year, your first investment
Right.
would have been earning interest.
Right.
That first 1.2 lakhs that you've been putting has been earning interest. So every year you keep earning, you keep earning, you keep earning. So
one way you beat inflation also, because inflation is like what, 4-5%?
6% is a more conservative estimate to take.
Right.
So you're beating inflation by earning 4% more.
Right.
And index funds, which tracks the Sensex,
Right.
like very low cost, you're not paying any management fees or anything because it's just tracking the index.
Right.
Those are giving like between 10 to 12%.
Right.
So that kind of consistency can really make a massive difference to your portfolio. And one thing that I do recommend is that as you keep earning more, start increasing investments also. Because the sad truth is that only money makes more money. So the moment you shift from that 10,000 per month, which is fine when I think you're in your 20s and
Right.
only earning about 50-60,000, the moment you go from that to putting in like 20,000 a month, 30,000 a month, 40,000 a month. That makes a massive shift to your finances.
When you say for the younger generation to invest, are you only talking about the equity, or you're talking about other instruments also? Or that's the best way to look at the compounding effect?
So I don't think equity is for everyone because all of us have like different requirements from it. I feel like one thing that we don't talk about is that just because you're young doesn't mean that you can take massive risks and put money inside the stock market and just play and see what happens. All of us have different situations at home. If I am very young, but I'm also supporting elderly parents, I can't afford to take risks, right? So in that case, even an RD, recurring deposit, is also a perfectly good investment.
It's more liquid, or it's almost the same as an equity?
It's the same. I mean, it's in the bank today with net banking. You can just liquidate at any point in time, right? So I don't think we should be villainizing traditional modes of investing.
But the interest or the earnings are much more lesser.
You get about between 8 to 9%. It's RDs give you more than FD.
FDs, right?
But it's not going to be maybe as high as equity, especially if you're putting money in a small cap fund or something.
Or a mid cap.
Or a mid cap fund. One thing I would recommend if you're young is that you can take a bit of risk. You can afford a bit of risk and you can put money into like an index fund, or if you're feeling particularly adventurous, put some money in small cap, mid cap. But make sure that you also pad it, or support it with some lower risk things as well. Like one of the things that I did when I started out saving was to build out an FD that I always had, like an emergency fund. Like I had 3 months of my salary sitting in an FD, so that in case something happens.
That's the safest bet for you.
It's the safest bet, and that's a habit I still continued. When we bought, so we bought our first house like recently. It took us only 12 years of saving. But it was very interesting because I still have that emergency fund sitting, right? The builder told us that if we wanted to block it at a certain price, we had to pay the token amount.
Right.
Right? You have to pay one token amount. And for all that money, we couldn't be liquidating. Even liquidating mutual funds would take 3 to 4 days.
Correct, yeah.
And that guy gave us a deadline of 24 hours.
And that's how...
And it was the emergency fund which came to our rescue. We were able to write that check out because there was money already sitting in the bank. Right. And the first thing I did after liquidating my mutual funds was to put it back, restore that little FD that I had, because it came in handy at that particular point in time. So I always recommend having some money in hand for these payments that might suddenly hit you, maybe a sudden hospitalization, something that happens. But if you're young, get these basics sorted out, and then you can always invest in equity.
And I would like to ask you specifically on the inclusion part of women and finance investing, because you gave an example of how you were able to buy your house or give that token amount because you had an understanding of finance. A bit more, light on how women should approach two types of women. One is, you already spoke about the younger one, but what about the married woman, where there's a constant, approach towards finances handled by the men of the house? How do you think women can start off a little bit on their own without having to really, make it difficult conversing to their families or husbands or brothers or XYZ? So a little bit on women in finance.
Sure. There's actually an entire chapter called Love and Money in the book where I talk about these nuances, especially in the Indian setup. And I do think it's important for married women to also, at the very least, know what's going on in their respective bank accounts. I feel like a lot of women are also happy to not know anything. They're also in that sort of ignorance is bliss kind of situation. But I think number one is to know what's going on, especially if you're an earning member, and even if you're not an earning member, what's going on in your husband's bank account is also something that should be discussed. And I think a lot of this, like you said, how do they get started, starts with conversation.
Okay.
Even something as simple as approaching their partner and being I also want to invest. Okay. I also want to open a demat account. Today it's very easy to open a demat account. It's all on the apps. All you need is an Aadhaar card or a PAN card. EKYC takes 2 minutes. They'll be like, take selfie and like, boom, your account is done. It's not how it used to be where you need to run from pillar to post. It's not at all cumbersome. It's never been more convenient to kind of own your finances and start investing. So this is actually a great time. And I don't think that there's a lot of conversation around how women need to keep it separate or there needs to be hygiene. I don't think there needs to be like some secret investing account or whatever unless they're going through some particularly rough marriage. I think having a conversation about it with your partner, saying that, I want to invest. Can I also start investing? I also want to start investing. What happens is that most partners, I think most supportive partners today, most supportive families today will say, no problem. Like, I'll give you whatever. Like, how much do you want to start out with? Let's see what happens. But when the dialogue kind of becomes, why do you need to get into this? Like, if the father or like father-in-law or like the husband starts talking about why do you want to get into this? Why do you need to get into this? That's when I think it gets difficult for women to kind of like get started. And that is really the time when, okay, you open it out on your own and see how you can handle your own budget and all of those
I think
things.
conversations is the key to
Yeah, but 90% of the time, I've found that most partners are more than happy that, the wife is also picking up investing and they also kind of like want to learn what's going on. I find that 90% of the case, it is supportive and 10% there is trouble. But I'm being very like open about the number of people I've spoken to. Most men are happy to share this load of like planning finances, right? Because even for the guys, it's like a constant strain on the men of the household as well to be like, I need to like figure this out for myself and like I need to support the family. I need to be the earning member. That's also pressure on men. So I found that most men are like happy to share that pressure also. But there is a lot of like social conditioning that women have saying like, okay, like if I make a mistake, then the consequences are much harsher, which is true. But I think the more you start talking about finances and the more you start conversing with your partner on finance and like kind of figuring out what's going on, figuring out investments, it makes life definitely easier. I think you need to be an equal partner in your marriage, when it comes to finances. You don't have to contribute, but you have
very
to know.
interesting point. Yeah. Any schemes by the government for women, especially married women? You also spoke about certain schemes for children that the government has. A little bit more on what benefits that the government is able to give for the women when they are entering into the entire scheme of investing and their personal finance.
There's nothing really, especially not for middle class or upper middle class women. There's nothing. But one thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that women get better home loan rates.
Okay.
Like when you're a working woman and you're applying for a home loan and you're the sole applicant, you get a discount on the home loan interest.
Is it like a scheme or is it case on case based on the bank? And
It depends on the bank, but 9 out of 10 banks give better rates to women. Also, there are schemes for women who are looking to set up their own business. You do get a very low interest rate loan if you're looking to set up your own business. There are a lot of Mahila schemes that encourage
this is
small,
for only
medium
sole
entrepreneurs.
women, or this is also for women with partners?
Married women,
Married women.
it doesn't matter. But if you're starting out as a businesswoman and you want to start your business, especially for micro businesses, small businesses,
Right.
you get loans that are
Better rate,
at
much more
very
affordable.
cheap rates
Okay.
for starting out your business.
Speaking of women, you also have written in your book some schemes for children.
Yeah.
A bit more on those schemes and how it could really help the family.
So one of the schemes that the government introduced, which I don't think a lot of middle and upper middle class people are really paying attention to, is the Sukanya Samriddhi scheme, where you get 8% interest for every year's contribution. It's guaranteed by the government.
If you have a girl child.
Only if you have a girl child, from when I think their age 0.
10,
Yeah,
10.
but 10 is the last year you can enter the scheme.
Right.
So when they're 18, the money that you get at the end of it is completely tax free.
Right.
So I think that's something that no one really was talking about, because to get like a very large amount of money, and you can contribute up to 1,50,000 per year,
Right.
into that scheme. So 8% interest guaranteed by the government, and everything is tax free. Both the corpus as well as the interest that the corpus is earned is tax free. So you basically contribute, I think, up to age 10. So if the earlier you start, the better. Then you would have had like 15 lakhs, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So you can't contribute after the child has crossed 10 years.
You can't join the scheme after the girl has completed 10 years. But for parents of like young girls, this is like a great scheme to get like tax-free corpus when they're 18. When you're saving for an education, this is what...
This is, you can withdraw only at the time of education, or it can be withdrawn at any given point.
After they're 18.
Or any
Yeah. Yeah, so it was originally conceived for marriage, basically, but it doesn't have to be for marriage. Like, you can take it out for any...
Is this the only scheme that the government has, or anything else government has for girl child, or...
This is the only scheme that Sukanya Samriddhi scheme is like a marquee scheme that the government brought out for Beti Bachao, as part of the Beti Bachao scheme. And I think it's also something that applies to all Indians, even like your top 10%. And it's not like one of the yojanas. I feel like the moment the government introduces something, we're not paying attention. But there are things that apply to you which will also be superbly beneficial, right? So I thought this was one under the radar scheme that no one's really talking about, which I wanted to highlight. Because for the reader who was English speaking and all of that, this was a scheme that I felt, especially if you have a girl child, is worth looking into.
Fantastic. A bit about the budget that came by this year. We had the new regime scheme, which people started to talk quite loudly in terms of some drastic changes, in terms of the savings and in terms of the different schemes, ATC or one of those things. A bit understanding of how the new regime is working compared to the old regime. Who should take the new, who should be with the old regime?
Yeah.
Which is also mentioned in your book, but something more elaborate that you would like to share.
Sure. I think in my early days of chartered accountancy, I did a lot of tax work. And I remember so many people taking up tax saving investments when the actual investment wasn't giving you too many returns.
Right.
And I think what was happening was also that a lot of companies were coming up with slightly useless instruments that only paid commission to the guy who was selling it to you.
Right.
But never gave you any real returns.
Okay.
And you were getting into it saying, okay, I'm saving tax by the end of it. So one of the good things that the new regime does is that it does away with everything that is tax saving. So what the new regime is essentially telling you is invest the way you want to. Invest the way you like to. Put money in things that matter to you. Don't think about tax.
Okay.
Right? Don't put your money in low performing investments simply for the purposes of saving tax. And I think what the government is also trying to tell you is that there is only so much tax you can save. Don't try to over optimize everything, right? So that's what the new regime is essentially doing. And I think it's great because it gives you more money back at the end of the day to put in where you see value in, right? So you have the freedom. You're not forced to be like, I have to claim this full 1,50,000 that ATC is giving me, or I have to put money into this extra thing to save more tax. So none of that. You put money in what you want to put money in. You will only pay this much tax. So that's why they raised the bar on the minimum taxable salary also to 12 lakhs, saying after this, no one needs to pay any tax. Go invest in whatever you want to invest. But remember that after a point, you can't over-optimize on tax. So there is one inflection point where I think if you're earning more than about 45 lakhs and have more than 7 lakhs in deductions, then that the old regime kind of becomes more beneficial. But until that stage, you're definitely better off with the newer regime. So I think that level of thinking and jumping through all those hoops has been eliminated,
right?
Which is a good thing. But if you are someone who's making a fair amount of money, like nearly 500,000 a year, and you have like a home loan, you have your 150,000 for ATC, maybe you're putting money in NPS, so and it all adds up to like about 7 lakhs in deductions, only then
The old is better.
does the old actually make sense.
Very interesting. And speaking of the newer generation, a lot of new startups are giving much more beyond salary, the fixed CTC. They're giving ESOPs. You think ESOPs is something which is actually a beneficial factor? Because when we speak about CTC and when we speak about in hand, there's a lot of difference. A lot of companies talk about high CTC, but what comes in hand is very different from what the paper reads. And then you have the concepts of ESOPs, which is more of vesting, more of binding the employee to your company for a certain number of years. So, what do you think of ESOP? It's been there since years, but a lot of new age startups are luring employees with the concept of ESOPs more than fixed salary. So, is this a good practice? And you think ESOPs are beneficial for people who are starting off with startups?
So I think it needs to be thought about. Simply because not every company that gives you ESOPs goes public, right?
Right.
Not all of us are working for Swiggy, Zomato, where, like people hit the absolute lottery when they went public or whatever. Not every company is going to have that kind of success rate. And I think barely about 5 to 6% of startups that give you ESOPs actually end up going public. So you really need to kind of apply that thought process to be like, okay, is this company something with that kind of future? And a lot of times it's a gamble.
Right.
It's definitely a gamble. So what I would say is that if you have the luxury to take the gamble, then you should take it. To be like, okay, there is a 90% probability that these ESOPs will actually not see any future. And it'll just be like some paper money sitting in the account. So you have to be okay with kind of taking that gamble. Otherwise, I'll always say it's better to have cash in hand. Like, I am a big cash in hand person. Unless you really see that, okay, you know what, this company, like 5 years, I am willing to take a bet that it's going to really go places. So it all comes down to the individual. If you're willing to take the gamble, then sure, go ahead. Who knows? Like, you'll see a multiplier of, 6x, 7x, 8x, sometimes even 20x.
That's like 1 in 10 cases.
I would say 1 in 100 cases. Like, there's one Swiggy, there's one Zomato, and there's so many startups, especially early stage, where you can't even tell like what's going on. So you really have to believe in the vision of like the company, of the founder, and you really have to believe that the company is there to stay and it's actually going to create value, which is very hard, like at an earlier stage. So it's a gamble at the start. But if you join after, like, say, like a series B, where you know that, okay, the company's valuation is good, it's been in the news, it does have a future, it can go somewhere, then you can take a slightly more calculated risk. But as the company matures, right, and as it becomes more and more successful, the probability of you getting stocks will also go down. So you need to know, like, that right time to
enter at the right time when you are much younger, when the company is much younger, and then the return is much higher in case it hits the roof. Else, I think it's a gamble that a lot of younger generation, right? You see that the pay scale the companies give the younger generation, is there a gender gap between the way companies are paying women versus the companies are paying men?
There is a gap. In fact, India ranks very low in the gender gap index when it comes to equal pay. But that's also like a function of people not talking about money, right? Because no one is discussing salaries, and because salaries are like ironclad, right? Like, no one knows what's going on. It's like one black box. No one knows the gap exists as well. So the other problem is the gap keeps compounding as you grow up, as you go up the career ladder. So let's say I have already started out on the back foot over here, and the next job is only going to give me 20 to 30% more of my previous job. So your previous salary is always going to be like a factor in determining your next salary.
Right.
And when you started on the back foot, and women are also terrible negotiators. This is like well established, right?
Is it?
Like maybe
Most of the HRs are women nowadays.
HR are women. That's why they're able to negotiate for the company. The employees are the ones who are not able to negotiate. To go up and tell the HR that I think I deserve a 50% raise. And then thinking what's going to happen? Like, worst case, they'll say no, right? This is how most men operate. Like, and this is how I have also learned to operate for myself. But it takes time. I feel like women are very hesitant when it comes to like negotiating because they're afraid that something might happen. They'll lose the job. But the worst thing that will happen is that they'll say, no, I can only give you like this much or whatever. So we've not been trained to ask boldly, especially in
Which
these
is why there's always a gap between.
so that gap keeps growing. Every company that you switch, you might get a bump on your previous salary,
Right?
but you're always going to be a bit behind. And you're never going to know until you start kind of talking about what other people are making. We don't talk about it within ourselves. Let's say like I am at an L7 or an L level 8 or level 7. And I have another L8, L7. We're not going to talk about each other's because it's not something one talks about, So because of that, you are also in the dark about how much you're making, and then you continue to stay in the dark. So it's a nationwide problem, is what I would say. But there's definitely a
in
gap.
India or also.
It's also very prevalent abroad because universally women are also the ones who take career breaks, right? So you have a child, you wanna be there for the child for a couple of years, and it so happens that the child is more dependent on the mother for better or for worse, So it is the woman who takes the career break of about 2 to 3 years. Then the child goes to school, you're ready to get back. But if the scene, if the hiring scene is not good, you have to take a couple of compromises again. So you're like, I just want to get back into the workforce. I'm not going to make a fuss about my salary. So again, there is a step that you have to take back. So all of this kind of like comes together. And if you want a more flexible role, you have to be willing to take a little bit less because you're getting that flexibility. So all of that kind of compounds, and then eventually women end up making less than men. So
I think such interesting topics that you have covered, which talks not only about the investment part, but also talks about the way one should do investments. So we spoke about women, we spoke about the schemes, we spoke about the way in which investment should be looked at. But if I have to ask you before we hit the the rapid fire round, in terms of what is your go-to investment pattern? Is it mutual funds first? Is it the FDs? Or is it the recurring deposits? Is it equity? Where do you find yourself in the best position when it comes to investment? And what do you recommend for the younger generation, the millennials, as we speak of, in terms of what should their go-to investment strategy be?
So, my go-to is now mutual funds.
Okay.
When I was younger, I did dabble in stocks, like directly investing in stocks, etc. But I've closed all of that. I don't have like the bandwidth to go refresh my feed or like move with the markets every day. I do want something that's in the background, running in the background. So the bulk of my savings are in mutual funds. I'm also diversifying my portfolio by putting more money into gold. I think
A bit of gold. In fact, we haven't
Gold.
spoken about gold quite.
yeah, I'm a big believer in
Yeah.
gold. I don't buy.
See, there's a difference between gold and jewelry.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, so
Jewelry is not an investment.
Oh.
I would never say jewelry.
a lot
is
of
an
women
investment.
consider, okay, buying gold jewelry would help them encash it or liquidate it when it's required in the future. So why do you think women have that notion about gold?
Because that's what you're exposed to. No, like growing up, like that used to be a space where women could actively go and like purchase, and they were given that free hand to go and buy gold, right? Because it was part of our culture to buy jewelry. So they started looking at that as an investment mode simply because they were also not exposed to the other ways in which you can invest in gold. So I invest in like gold mutual fund, gold ETF, and I have sovereign gold bonds, which the RBI has stopped issuing. But I genuinely believe that if you want to invest in physical gold, coins and bars are the best because you're not paying wastage, you're not paying labor charges on jewelry, you're not incurring any of that, you're not paying GST. So getting coins and bars are a better way to invest in physical gold.
Okay.
But even physical gold, I don't recommend because you still have to go through the whole finding a locker, keeping it safe. There's like a fear of theft always. Today, you can buy gold on GPay.
Right.
Like you can buy it directly from the Minerals and Metals Corporation of India. You can buy digital gold. You can buy gold ETFs, which through your demat account. You can buy gold mutual funds. So all of those are ways to invest in gold without actually buying the metal.
Physically.
Yeah, and I think gold is a fantastic hedge. And if gold prices are anything to go by, like people who bought gold from a while ago are just like laughing, staring. Because prices have doubled from like 2021, 2020. So from what? I think 5,000 rupees a gram to it's come to nearly 10,000 rupees a gram. So it's a great hedge, and I think it's great for when the world is feeling very uncertain. Gold is a kind of like safe haven. So I also have money in gold. And I think it's great that our culture wants you to also invest in gold.
True.
So it is a fantastic investment as long as you don't buy jewelry because that's not like an investment at all. Then the third would be in like slightly safer investments like your FDs and all. So the bulk of my investments are in mutual funds. Next comes gold. Then I have FDs, and now there are other avenues like I'm looking into this thing called real estate investment trusts that allows you like partial ownership into commercial real estate.
Okay.
So basically, a property developer like, for example, Embassy Manyata, they have an REIT. So it's like they are building a very big commercial property and you get to contribute towards
Basically, it's like making a company public and you want shareholders to...
For one project. So that one project becomes publicly available.
Right.
So that's a real estate investment trust. And then whatever that project earns is split between the partial owners. So it's a way to get into commercial real estate without having that massive outlay, which real estate investments typically kind of require you. Like you can't be putting in crores, right? Like here you can invest in lakhs but still get like...
What about alternate investments? Crypto is a big topic over the last few years.
Yeah.
What do you think about crypto in India?
Crypto, I'm not a fan of. One, because I don't think it's great. I think it's an investment that will definitely give rewards in maybe 20 years' time. But India does not like crypto, which is why I think it's a bad investment, because when the government does not want you to do something, you're going to be penalized. So you look at the high rates of tax when it comes to crypto. Every transaction gets monitored. So it's a very hostile environment for crypto investors in India, which is why I don't recommend it. Because unlike mutual funds where you can kind of like set it off, for example, if you can sell your mutual funds and buy property and your capital gains can be set off. It's very friendly. Whereas the tax conditions for crypto investments are very hostile. It's like winning the lottery.
It's going to happen.
Like 30% you have to pay. It doesn't matter what you use it for. So that's why I'm like very wary. And I don't think it's stabilized yet.
It's not stabilized.
It's not for beginner investors. I think you have to look at it as like a gamble.
Surplus money, and if you've done with all your main investments and if you still got some surplus, you try to put
It's a gamble. It's a gamble. If you're willing to take the gamble, go ahead, take it. If you have money to lose, if you have money that you don't particularly care about, then go ahead and invest in cryptos. Because we all saw what happened when things fell in 2021.
True.
And people were in debt. People had borrowed to invest in crypto.
Right.
So everyone went through a very tough time. So that's why I don't recommend crypto.
Wow. And just the last question: how does or how should retirement look like for a 30-year-old or for a 25-year-old when you're talking about the next 20 years or 30 years? How do you think he or she should look at retirement at the age of 50, 60? Where do you think the money should come from? How do you think the money should be invested in for a safe, good retirement?
So one of the things about retirement, which I've also addressed slightly in the book, is that people used to retire at 50, 60, saying, I'll live till 75, 80. But today, your lifespans are going to be longer than ever because medical advancements have happened that will enable you to live even up to 100. And everyone is so fitness conscious. People are like working out, they're exercising, they're very healthy, which means that you're going to live for a much longer time. And I don't think we can look at retirement as a okay, let me retire at 60 and just stay at home sort of thing anymore. I do think we have to work much longer than we may have planned for because we're going to live much longer than we may have planned for. Because at 50, 60, you're thinking about having enough money for at least 30 years.
Right.
Because it's very usual for people to live up to 90, 95,
Right.
and they'll be walking around in the society, So everyone's much healthier than they used to be. So I think you have to look at retirement also from that lens of what if I live up to 90? Like how am I going to have money for 90? Which is why I think a lot of people are now embracing micro retirements where they take a break of about 3 to 4 years. They dabble in something, they maybe upskill, and then they come back into the workforce, work for another 10 years, then take another small break. So I think you have to keep working. The sad truth is that we have to keep working for much longer than we used to, do. Because we're seeing it with our own parents' generation now. They're much healthier than they used to be. 50-year-olds don't look like 50-year-olds. 30-year-olds don't look like 30-year-olds. Today, if you go to like a school and you see the parents, they don't look like parents. Whereas in our generation, I think when you looked at the parents, they were
Know that
parents.
they were parents.
Yeah. You can't tell who's a mother and who's not a mother anymore. Unlike in the previous generation when it was fairly obvious. So people are healthier than ever, fitter than ever. And
You also spoke about that 70% of your, or I think what 7 times the amount that you're earning today should be looked at, or 7 times the amount you're spending today should be looked at the amount that you need to have as a surplus when you retire or something.
Yeah. So there is a common formula which people use when they try to retire early.
Okay.
Where you can look at your retirement corpus two ways.
Okay.
You can either look at it as a fruit basket,
Okay.
where, okay, I've saved this much money. This works great if you're like a double income, no kid couple,
Okay.
where you're like, okay, I've saved up this money and I'm going to keep drawing from that money,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
And I'm going to keep drawing. And then for the rest of, like, I know I'm going to be spending so much every month.
Hmm.
I'll save up like maybe 1 crore, 2 crores, whatever, and I'll keep drawing from it until I pass, whatever. Or you can look at it as a tree that gives you the fruit, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to save up a certain amount of money and it's going to give me interest
Right.
every month, which I will spend.
Right.
So those are like two approaches. I think having that tree approach is great if you have kids, because then the tree passes on to your child and they can enjoy the fruits of that tree quite literally. But if you don't have kids or don't plan to have kids, you can save an amount and keep withdrawing. So those are two ways to kind of approach your break or your retirement. But I think all the calculations go for a toss if you live longer than what you're expected to. So, or if you suddenly find new habits, like
Right, yeah.
maybe after 50, 60, you're fit enough to continue traveling
True.
and you do want to see more of the world. So you'll end up spending maybe a bit more. So everyone's mileage.
It's a very important point you mentioned that I think working, right? What it was earlier, you have to continue to work way beyond what you were, what you were thought of, that I would probably work only at a certain age or only until a certain age, keeping your retirement in mind. But I think the working has to now become much more longer, considering one is the life expectancy, one is your lifestyle. Maybe you have kids, you don't have kids. So I think all of those factors will contribute to the way, or the number of years you have to now start, looking at work before you start retiring.
Yeah, I also think people have to approach work in a very kind of different way, because hustle culture is also doing more harm than good. Like a lot of people think that they work very hard for 10 years, then after that it becomes fine, or after that, like I can retire and like look back and all. But it's much more sustainable to like go up the ladder slowly, then burn yourself out, because that way you can work for a much longer time, and you can work like the way our parents did. I think they like my father continues to work, but it's on his terms, right? Um, but today people take on so much stress, and like the work environments themselves are like very bad. They're very stressful. So I feel like you need to also approach work a bit differently, saying, okay, like what can I do where I might not make as much money as my peers now, but I can work for a longer period of time. So I think those are the questions also that people have to ask themselves. Otherwise, it's going to be like work very hard, burn out, take 3 to 4 years off, then, like go back. And people are doing that as well. But I don't think that's very healthy.
Well, I think a lot of information that you have spilled out during this entire podcast. Definitely, the book is going to help those who read it, and it's a must recommend. It is definitely a pocket-friendly book which has a lot of information. So I don't think it's just a book which is friendly, but it's also a book which is friendly with a lot of information, because normally friends don't share the right information. But this book definitely will be a good guide to a lot of new investors, younger audience, to understand what finance is all about. So very happy that we discussed so much about the book and the topics that you've covered. But before we end this podcast, a little bit of fun segment we've planned for you to ask you your interest
Rapid fire.
on the entire scheme of finance. What do you prefer and what you don't prefer? So without much ado, we've planned something called as Money Minute with Lavanya. First of all, this or that. Okay, save first, invest, or spend smartly.
Invest.
Okay. Fixed deposit, SIP, or mutual fund?
SIP.
In mutual fund.
Yeah.
Okay. Budgeting apps or old school Excel sheets?
Excel sheets. I'm an Excel girl all the way.
Okay. You don't use apps?
No.
Okay.
I'm still on Google Sheets.
Okay. Credit card rewards or cashback offers?
Credit card rewards.
Yeah. Okay. Renting or owning a house, maybe?
I think it depends for everyone, but okay, I'll say owning.
Okay. Short-term gains or long-term stability?
Long-term stability.
Okay. Gold or equity?
Tough one, especially right now. But before I turned 35, I would have said equity. After 35, now I'm saying gold.
Okay. Buy now or wait for a sale?
Wait for a sale.
Yeah. Okay. Invest in yourself first or investing in assets?
I would say invest in yourself, because then you'll make enough money to invest in assets.
Okay. What if that takes more time than anticipated? It's still worth it?
It's still worth it.
Okay. Fixed deposit or PPF?
PPF.
Okay. What's the biggest money myth you wish people would stop believing?
That personal finance is hard. That personal finance is too complicated for you to understand. It's not. You just have to read my book.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. The best money advice you've ever received?
Is to not get into debt. I think I grew up in a very debt-averse family, and
like
we
bank
were
loans and all of that?
Yeah, we were very anti-loan, and I think one thing that it really taught me was to wait until I had enough to actually go and spend. So delayed gratification is not something.
That's a very important topic, and you also mentioned it a bit in the book.
Yeah, so delayed gratification is something that we practiced, and I think that's the best money advice. Like whether it's spending on something or whether it's to just acquire something, right? Like wait until you can actually go out and afford it. Even if tomorrow you know you're going to make the money to be able to afford it, wait. I generally have found that waiting solves a lot of problems. Sometimes you want something very badly because you've seen it,
Right.
somewhere. You've seen friend with the newest iPhone and you want it, but then you wait, right, to get it. Not only does it feel sweeter because you've waited to get it, a lot of the times you'll change your mind also.
Right.
You'll be like, I don't want it. And then you would have saved money as well. So I think it works out.
Wow.
Delayed gratification is a great money lesson.
Great. Okay. Credit cards, you love them or you avoid them?
I really like my credit cards. I have two. They're both rewards-led credit cards, and I think it's a very smart way to be rewarded for expenses that you're already incurring. So one thing I say is that don't swipe just because you have a credit card. But if you can be rewarded for existing expenses, credit cards are a superb tool. You
But
get
I
to
think
build
credit
it.
cards with EMI is bad, right?
Yeah. Always pay your bill in full. Never take an EMI on credit cards
EMI is the
because
worst thing about
it's
credit
like
cards.
40% interest that
But
you'll end up
maximum
paying.
offers come on EMIs.
No, avoid them at all costs. You don't need that offer. I know they say zero cost EMI and all, but you don't want to get into that EMI lifestyle
Okay.
at all. Like, if you can get rewards or if you can get cash back, whatever it is you prefer, and you're able to pay your bills in full, credit cards are superb.
Superb. Okay. First thing you bought with your first salary?
My first salary was very less, but I saved for
Not the 1,000 that you got in your internship, but when you probably
when I actually started making
working,
money,
yeah.
I got a sari for my mother.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Money in your 20s, is it freedom or fear?
I think it's a mix of both, but more freedom than fear. I think it's a fantastic feeling to have your own money in your 20s after asking dad and mom for pocket money. To have it in your own account and for that to be in your control is the most amazing feeling of all time.
Okay, interesting. While you mentioned already that you're more of an Excel person, but in case you had to recommend an app, a financial app, what would that be? Or which one would that be?
Finance app, there are a couple of budgeting apps, but I'm sorry, I can't think of any like right now, but I only use like my Demat account apps. So I don't really have any budget app recommendations, but there are a couple that help you out.
Speaking of Demat, your most preferred investment app?
I use Zerodha. I use the Kite app. It's a coin app where you can invest in mutual funds, and Kite if you want to invest in shares or ETFs. So I find it to be super user friendly and very stable, very transparent. I'm a massive fan of everything that Nitin Kamath does. So
You're in Bangalore, maybe you can set up a coffee with him.
I hope to at some point.
Okay, one money habit you struggle with.
Money habit I struggle with. I think one thing that I genuinely struggle with is kind of being strict about money with my child.
With your child?
With my child. So I feel like you're earning, right? And my partner is earning. We have this one child and we love him to bits and we want to give him everything. And that in itself is a bit dangerous because then they're going to get used to like having everything, right? So we really struggle with this like push-pull when delayed gratification for practicing it with our child, because one part of it is like, who else are we earning for?
Right.
You know, like I am earning for this child, like why would I say no to him? But at the same time, you also know that it's important to say no so that he grows up with healthier money values. So that is something that we do kind of like go back and forth on. But that's generally like one thing that I'm struggling with. Like I have all these values, but because I'm able to afford more or because I'm able to make more money, I'm not able to pass it on to like my child. So that's something I'm like really struggling with, and hopefully it gets better over time.
Speaking of children, one thing school should definitely teach in the schooling years
is that money doesn't grow on trees. You know, I feel like school kids also, aren't introduced to the concept of saving as early as they ought to. You vaguely hear it when your parents talk about it, but you're not really exposed to it in a structured way. You're not taught as to why it's important and why saving can be a very big difference can make a very big difference in your future. I feel like if it gets drilled into your head at a slightly earlier age, you'll be able to make much better decisions as you kind of like start navigating the world, right? Even things like peer pressure, which we're all so susceptible to when we're in our early 20s, when we're students. It's like when your friend gets something, whether or not you can afford it, you also want it. When your friend goes somewhere, you also want to go, whether or not you can afford it. So managing those decisions becomes easier if you're given a framework at an earlier age. So I feel like saving and the importance of saving needs to be taught like at an earlier age.
And last two questions. A personal finance book apart from yours that you would recommend?
I would really recommend That Stock Money by Monica Hallan.
Right, you mentioned
I
about
really
that.
admire her writing. I think it's very to the point.
Right.
And another book that I'd really recommend is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I'm
Right.
sure most people have read it, but I still think it's worth mentioning because it gives you such a great foundation for understanding, why we think about money the way that we do. And there's this new book that I'm reading called The Simplicity of Wealth. I forget the author's name. Is it okay if I refer to it for like?
That's fine. So,
But no. So the third book I recommend is this book called The Simplicity of Wealth. It's written by an American author, but the lessons are fairly universal. So he says there are two ways to look at financial freedom, right? One is to make so much money that you don't have to care about it, or you train yourself to live with less. And I don't think any of us are taught to do the latter, where you're like, you don't need all the bells and whistles.
More money, but
You don't need all the bells and whistles. If you can train yourself to be content with less, you can actually live life on your own terms. So that is more or less like the values that he brings upon in his book. And I thought it was very eye-opening because you're constantly taught to go after more, to go after more, to make more. Whereas he says like, no, learn to live with less, then you will always have more. So The Simplicity of Wealth is also like a book that I would recommend.
And last question is the title of your next book?
Money Can Buy You Happiness. I think
that's quite contradictory in terms of,
I'm thinking of like a trilogy. So one of the things that I remember thinking about was that while writing the Love and Money chapter, is that it deserves perhaps like a book of its own. So I was thinking of like Money Can't Buy Your Love.
Okay.
As perhaps maybe that's like my next book, Money Can't Buy You Love.
Okay.
To actually delve into how money disrupts relationships as well as strengthens relationships, right? Across the board. And it's not something people talk about, and yet it's the leading cause of divorce, So that was something I wanted to explore, but I don't have any contracts or anything just yet. I'll put that also out there.
I think it won't be long before you get one.
Yeah, Simon & Schuster, Mega, are you listening? So
fantastic. I think it's a wrap. Right. And that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of the SapnaRise podcast. Lavanya Mohan has reminded us that money isn't just math, it's a mindset. It's an art. It's not just about saving and spending, but about understanding where we come from and what we value and how we shape the life we want through the financial choices we make every day. Her book, Money Doesn't Grow on Trees, is a must-read for anyone looking to take control of their finances without fear, guilt, or jargon. It's real, it's relatable, and it's a guide you'll come back to again and again. Lavanya, thank you for making this such a wonderful, intimidating, and a lot more human into this entire podcast. To our listeners at SapnaRise, we're committed to bringing you closer to the authors and stories that have the power to change lives. If this episode sparked a thought, shared a truth, or helped you look at your money story differently, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Pick up your copy at your nearest Sapna book house or order it online at sapnaonline.com. And don't forget to follow SapnaRise and Sapna Book House on Instagram to stay updated on exciting events, book signings, and in-store experiences with your favorite authors and books. Until next time, keep rising with purpose. This is SapnaRise.